Hi, thanks for joining us, and my guest today is Dan McSkimming. Dan, thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, so, this is about documenting the life and times of Fernie, and you've been here a long time, and you've done a lot of different things. When did you first hear about Fernie?
I'm from Montreal originally, and I left after university. I left and went to Banff, and worked at a ski hill there for a couple of years, and then didn't want to live in Banff. I had a great time, but I decided I want to live somewhere else, and I went on a road trip out to Whistler and back, and found Fernie, and it's the place that had the skiing, which was my passion, and still is, and that I wanted, but in more of a town, sort of a livable or a home type of a town. And then I met a man named Dave Rogers, who most people know, and he hired me, and I worked for him. He eventually became we became partners on a store I had. So I came here in 1981, I believe.
Ah,
It was the first year I worked at the ski hill with Dave, and for Heiko, and with guys like Willard and Randy Gliggy and all those names that some people will bring up. Some guys, Robin Ziggers is still working on the hill as a
Yeah.
mountain manager. There's a few bodies still around. So that's how I got here. I got here, drank the water, and never left.
well, you must have liked it.
Well, and I guess to finish that part of it, I was working for the ski school, and my wife to be was loading T-bars. And
Oh, is that how you met
she was
then?
working on the T-bar, loading the Deer T-bar, and that's how I met her. And so when we got together at that point in time. We were married in 1984, so we've just passed 35 years, and
Congratulations.
two kids, and yeah, we went the distance. And my focus on Fernie has always been, and it's changed so much, has always been the ski hill. I still ski. I still skied over 90 days last year. It's changed a lot, and the town has changed in that now, the summer recreation is so big, and there's so many other things that have been added to it. But when I got here in the early 80s, it was the ski hill, and then the summer were just,
Dead.
it was like, you could fire a cannon down Second Avenue.
Yeah.
There's not much going on down there. So that was, we've seen a big change, and, all good. All good, all positive for sure. But the ski hill keeps plugging away, and it's still close to my heart. My wife would say that she liked to move somewhere warmer, but as long as I'm healthy and can ski, I'm not going anywhere.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up about the change from not just winter, but summer, because summer is pretty busy these days.
It is, and it's interesting going back there. When you told me that I was going to come here and talk to you about stuff like this, and I started thinking about the things I remember from Fernie from their early 80s, and you would remember this, that when I phoned somebody, I could just dial 5 and then the last 4 numbers.
Yeah.
And then we had to dial 423, and that was like, oh,
I
really?
know, how could we? Why?
And now we've added the area code, and there's more than just 423, but those are some of my early memories of that. But the mountain biking started back then. I had opened in 1984 or 5 a ski shop called Fernie Sports that went for about just around 25 years. And we were selling mountain bikes. We were open in the summer because no one was open in the summer at that point. We decided that we would do year round and sell these new things called mountain bikes. And we were only one of 3 or 4 stores in British Columbia selling these machines. And some friends of mine and I would go out and beat them up and learn how to fix them. And that's when the mountain biking craze started here. And if you look what we were selling and the bikes now, and I know people like Pat Gilmore and Mitch still have their old original ones they bought from me back in those days. They're a far cry from what you see them riding on today. But a lot of that development in mountain biking and the technology and the way people go about it, a lot of it was on what they call the North Coast, out north of Vancouver. But a lot of it was in the Kootenays, and there was a lot of mountain biking going on here, and the business was evolving, and I would say that Fernie had a lot to do it. One thing, and I'll just sort of a side story. A friend of mine and I would go out mountain biking, and one day we came around a corner. We're on the power line coming from Hosmer, and there was a little bear cub playing in a puddle, and I almost ran over it. And if I I just missed him, and I missed my friend, fortunately, and the mother, she started chasing us, and fortunately we were on a downslope and we were able to get away. But, you know, we got back and started going, you know, we're traveling fast, and we're traveling quietly. And we're surprising these animals out in the bush. And this may not sound like anything profound, but we just weren't thinking in those terms because nobody was doing this yet in 1983, 84. So I looked at one of my catalogs and I said, we need a bell. We need to put a bell on our bike. And the only bells they sold were for kids' tricycles, and they had Mickey Mouse on them. And they had Mickey Mouse in one pack, and another pack had Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, and Goofy. You get the variety pack or the single pack. Mickey Mouse did outsell the rest.
Oh yeah.
And I started bringing them in, and they started selling like crazy. And the company supplier called me and said, "You are selling more of these bells than all of Vancouver. You know, what's going on?" And so I said, well, this is the problem. This is what we're trying to solve, and while we're doing it, because we weren't selling tricycles, we were selling kids' bikes, but mostly adult bikes. And I don't think it had anything to do with that conversation, but certainly bells on mountain bikes today are something that are becoming very commonplace, and they have special fancy bells that cost, they were $1.
That's
they were
it?
99 cents, yeah.
Wow.
We sold them for. And but that was sort of there's a lot of things that happened in biking back in those days that shaped what they're doing today and whatnot.
But also when you think of when they started to build the trails, because Pat Gilmore has been involved for about 35 years.
That's right. Well,
So-
Pat and Mitchie, and absolutely they were starting to make trails. And at that time we were just following power lines and things like that, and we were going up to Island Lake, although there was nothing there. We were using that road. And then the odd game trail was being almost like they were being converted to mountain bike trails, it seemed. And Pat was doing that for that whole time, for sure. It gained a bit of momentum later on in time in the 90s and certainly whatnot with, and early 2000s with guys like Eric Moocher and stuff like that who were doing a bunch of things too. But no, Pat was right in from the get-go, that's for sure. I remember
And there
him.
was real vision here for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And now you look at this town, and now they're riding on those big fat tires and going. Everybody's riding them in the summer,
All
in the
winter
winter
long.
too, and it's become a real. And I know people now, and in the business I am of real estate, people who have homes here who don't spend any time in the winter. They rent them out in the winter, and they only use them in the summer because they don't mountain bike. They might not ski or snowboard or what have you. So that's a big change from those days, from my perspective. And it's, I think, a real positive change for sure. And the trails, which I don't mountain bike it much anymore, but I walk them and enjoy them, and it's a wonderful way to see the backcountry here, and everybody I talk to still is blown away from it.
And there's all kinds of trails too,
Oh, yeah.
for all levels of walkers and
Yeah.
hikers and
That's right. That's right.
bikers.
So it's been that, and the fact that I think there was an article, and I can't give you a date of when it was, but I think it was. Anyways, about the fly fishing, about the upriver being a premier fly fishing destination, and that blew open the fly fishing business
Another
here
business,
too.
yeah.
And that was another thing now you could have in the summer too, with the fishing. It was the fishing, and so now there's starting to become more legs on the stool, keeping the economy up in the summer from that perspective. So, not that people didn't fish back then.
Oh yeah, but not. They didn't know. They hadn't discovered us as the sign says.
And then the commercial,
summer.
the commercial meaning my son's a fishing guide. The guiding business became more prevalent and is very strong here. The amount of money that comes through this place as a result of that. But there weren't any guides back then. There was none of that stuff going on. It was just go out and fish. And now they've changed the rules and have that classified waters about who can fish when and where if you're from out of province and all those things that they didn't have to have before because there wasn't the pressure on here.
No.
I mean, we only had a 2-lane highway through Fernie,
Yeah.
and there was no passing lanes anywhere. But anyways, that was some of the things I think that have changed the summer business. As far as the winter business goes, well, for those who are familiar with the ski hill, there's only one lift that's still on the mountain that was here when I first came here.
Yeah.
And it's not even where it used to be. They moved it.
Oh
It
really?
used to be the Deer T-Bar, where I met my wife, on the meadow, and now it's called the Hallback. They moved it down to the bottom, Cedar Bowl. But none of the other lifts are original anymore from when we first came here. We had a double chair and a T-bar,
I remember
and
that
an old T-bar at the bottom that they only used for overflow, and so it's considerably. I was here before the boomerang chair went in, when I think it would have gone in about 83 or 84. Heiko put that up, Boomerang Ridge.
That was big news too.
It was, and it was a well-placed lift that opened up a lot of terrain. It was very well done as far as, you know, the planning and thinking behind it. We could still ski that terrain, but it just was a lot of walking and pulling and skating out of Cedar Bowl. But then you can just, so the powder doesn't last as long anymore. That's the one thing. A snowfall powder dump would last us 3 or 4 days. Now it lasts till about 11 o'clock. So.
Where was your business?
I was when we first opened in '84, it was kitty corner to what was then, well, wasn't yet, but was going to be Rip and Richards, and is now the Bridge in the building across from
I remember
what was the
there.
Three Sisters Hotel and now is the Travel Lodge.
Yeah.
It was across from there.
Yeah.
We were there for 10 or 12 years, and then we purchased the building from
Because it used to be Libby's.
Libby's or Dixie Chicken or
Something like that.
Yeah, Libby's. It was, we bought it from Libby's there.
It used to be Dog and Suds one time when they first opened it.
So we bought that building. I don't remember what year, but I would say it was in mid-90s or something.
It had like a covered walkways where cars could park.
Yeah.
And then the attendants would come and take your order in the middle.
Yeah, well, the part of that swoopy roof in that structure had been taken down, but you could still see where it was and where the supports in the concrete were and stuff like that. So, so then we went there until we wound that down in about 2008, I guess, or something like that.
Is that when you finally closed?
If I recall, dissolving the company and saying this is it and whatnot and selling everything off, I think the actual official paperwork was about 2008 or 2009, but I could be wrong.
What made you decide? Because it was a very lucrative business.
Well, it was. It went through some ups and downs. It might have been a little later than that. We had a really tough one. We had the recession, 07, 08, and then we had a really bad snow year. And I remember because the ski hill was all but closed because of a really ugly wet snow event that happened on the Alberta weekend in February. The cars were lined up back to town, and they couldn't get anybody up there, and it was a gong show. It was a mess. And when you're in that kind of business, if you miss Christmas or if you miss those weekends, you can't get them back. Any hotel room that doesn't rent out, they can't get that room back, and it was the same in our business. So that was a tough one, and I had felt that we were pretty at the front end of the new ski technology and all the cool stuff and mountain bikes, but I was getting older and I wasn't mountain biking and skiing in the same way, and I didn't feel that I was keeping up with that as well as I probably should have, and that was plenty of time to do it.
Had you gotten into the real estate business already by then?
I got in the real estate business in 2003. I was on council with and when I got my license, and I was doing both and then transitioned out of the other one. I think it was 03 that I got my license and started selling, and when you and I sat beside each other on council.
Yeah, because we started at the same year.
Yep.
I think it was November 2001 that we got elected. No, I thought it was 2001.
Well, we'll have to look that up. Regardless, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, because then we had 2002 that we were all,
Yeah.
the whole year that we were there. Because usually you get, it's November, it used to be November, the election. And then you were there on like December and would be the first meeting, and then all of 2002.
There's a good way to, there's a way to find that out. But anyways. You're on.
So you went into the realty business. So tell me how things have changed in that business from when you first came to now.
Well, I mean, I tell people that I deal with, and I bought my house on 6th Avenue. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember 561. It was something 6th Avenue. Down backs onto the Rotary Park.
Oh, really?
Where the shelter used to be that they built for $25,000. and that was about 85 or 86. And so when you look at what's happened with pricing now since then, it's crazy. You know, it's difficult for really to swallow and to justify and to understand. You know, will there ever be affordable housing? But we don't want to go into that. Take that one up. But the way we do business, and a lot of it, since I started in 03 and even before that, because I knew people who were trying to get me into it, and I had done various things in real estate, just personally, besides price, just the way the world works is different now, and the way you have to go about it, and you know, the MLS was a great thing, and now everything is online, and people are much more informed, and working in the real estate business now is considerably different than it was 15 years ago, and that's just that period of time.
Is it easier or more difficult?
It's easier in that there's more information. It's better accessible for people. People have we get somebody coming through our door or calling us to go see property, and they have more information than they used to. It's worse because the regulations are getting tougher and tougher, and it's becoming a real nightmare, everybody's so scared stiff of making a mistake and getting sued and everything else, and the province has reacted because of what has been happening in Vancouver, some of the nonsense that went on down there, so we get painted with the same brush. And then, of course, you have the independents and the property guys and the things like that have changed just the way things work. But that's just the way the world is. That's everything. I mean, that was happening when people, you can go back even before my time here, that you will remember that when the mines went 4 on 4 off, how it changed the retailers, because on the 4 off, the guys could head to Lethbridge, and they could shop over there and get out of town. They didn't get paid PSD and all those types of things, and it really changed the nature of retail and business in here. So everything has that sort of cause and effect, and it's been likewise with certainly with real estate, and you talk to the businesses downtown now, and I've always have a couple of buddies that own different places. I talked to Johnny about Gear Hub, and I talked to one of the guys in Straight Line and whatnot, and Adam Warren in Commit, and you can buy everything online. You can order stuff, and it shows up at your door, and you can sit there late at night on your computer. You don't have to go. People don't look and touch things like they used to, and so that's no different than what we went through in that part. And I was starting to see that in retail when I had Fernie Sports, people starting to shop further afield and be able to find things differently, and it beats the daylights out of small independents and our retailers downtown. And what's so nice about how Fernie has evolved from where it used to be is that, in my opinion, downtown is such a great place to be. They have the decks. They have the beautiful flowers, and they've got a really neat cross-section of places where you can get chocolate and ice cream and go grab yourself a beverage and things like that in the summer. And so those shops, I think, flourish and do well because of that, because of the atmosphere that's been created down there. And that somewhat hopefully beats back the whole thing of shopping online and trying to get a better deal. But when you're in retail, you constantly have people saying, well, I want a better deal, I can get it cheaper over there. The Albertans would always say, can you not charge us PSD? And I'm sorry, it's the law. We used to call it provincial snow tax. I know that you're not skiing in Alberta today. I used to say people, but they didn't get my sense of humor.
I am reading about how Amazon is killing retail. And I've only used Amazon 3 times. And it's because there was some Italian food products that I got at the Italian store, and I don't get to the Italian store in Calgary hardly any time because it's far from where my kids live. And so one day I thought, well, everybody says you can find everything. So sure enough, I found it on Amazon. So I ordered 3 times, but I read an article just day before yesterday that talked about how Amazon treats its workers in the warehouses, and it is appalling. They have little robots that run to bring stuff, and then these people have to keep up to the robots, which they can't, and they get hurt. And they talked about how people were fainting and vomiting, and they wouldn't stop. And somebody went and sneaked and called 911, and they found that there was a gas leak, and they could have all died, but they wouldn't be they weren't allowed to stop working.
Well, when
And
you,
so I said, that's it, I will never order from Amazon
think
again if this is how they treat their people.
I think, I mean, speaking of my experience with Fernie Sports from 1984 on, it started with, there was only actually one Sport Check. It was an independent store in Calgary. It was just 3 or 4 guys that owned Sport Check. And then eventually it got bought out by the Fernie Group and Fernie Locker Rooms and all that thing that Fernie was sport experts eventually and all the rest of it. However, the buying power of the bigger stores and then the bigger box stores, and the same with your Walmarts and things like that. But now even they're struggling because of the online.
Yeah.
So that's just the first. It was go to your local and support locally and get their expertise, and then they went to big box stores and you can't compete with the prices, and then now it's gone to online for pricing and convenience, and people have to are making those choices. But I think we're fortunate in Fernie, and retail's hard. But you have some really good retailers downtown, and who are really passionate about what they sell and their stuff and their and again the atmosphere I think that has been created downtown by the merchants, the city initiatives that you helped get kind of going on, the flowers downtown, and we got the decks out there for people to have a snack and stuff like that. All those things have added to making it more viable, and really ultimately it hasn't changed in all that time. It is still just really 3 blocks. It's from the corner of 4th Street where
Yeah.
the TD Bank is, and the Spartan East Medical Clinic, and it goes down as far as
Odyssey.
yeah,
And
Odyssey,
the Bean Pot.
Yeah, and the Bean Pot. I was going to say where I get give them all my money for my car insurance. The next block where the Bank of Montreal used to be and stuff like that, that's sort of been secondary, and the block up where Free Press is has been sort of on the periphery, but it has always been just those 3 blocks. Remember, there's a car dealership it's not Overweighty anymore even, is it? Save-On. There was a car dealership right on that corner, and I
It was
remember
the Ford
King
garage.
and where the King's Hotel was,
Yeah.
on that same block where the Free Press is.
Yeah.
And they sort of come and go, but those 3 main blocks have remained. They certainly the facades and what happens down there. But you look at it, and you look at things like, you've got the museum right in the middle of it, which is such a cool space and attracting people in and out, and you've got so many different things that it's not a bad 3-block walk. When you go to Banff, when I lived in Banff in the early 80s, there was, and there may still be, I don't go there much anymore, there's 2 candy stores. And there was one that was quite modern, almost like a Laura Secord. And the other one, on the other side of the street, they had the gumball jars and all that stuff. Well, the story goes that the same guy owned them both. And the one on the sunny side of the street did twice as much money as the other one. Everybody walks on the sunny side of the street.
Oh.
And I always think about that.
I had never thought of that.
Because when I try to park downtown, and if I got 3 or 4 errands to do, you try to park and you go and you park strategically and go for a nice walk, right? I'm always walking down the sunny side of the street.
It's true.
No, I'm not sure. That's not very scientific. Sorry, folks, but that's you're stuck with that piece of
But it's
information.
true. A person always goes on the sunny side.
Yeah, the sunny side of the street. So, but downtown still has some great feel to it. The old stores. It's a shame that, time just makes some of them redundant and they leave, and the Ray Halls were gone, and Menifee's shoes, and yet the arts councils or the art co-ops, that great old building to go in there, it's still so neat,
And the bookstore.
Yeah. So those
great.
are things that I think still create an experience that you can't get online, and I think we're fortunate. I know that, there's some cool places in places like Nelson. We don't have the only ones who are doing that sort of thing. Revelstoke's got some neat spots too, but I think Fernie's done, the people who love this valley have done a good job of preserving that nice downtown feel, and it's done well for business. And actually, I think it was 2 years ago, and I could be wrong, 2 or 3 years ago, that the hotels were booked for the July long weekend, and the hotels had never been booked in the summer before, 100%. And now you can't get in on a long weekend, and most weekends are very full. and it's just kind of grown. I mean, Wapiti,
Yeah.
what it's done for the town, and some of the things they've had. Remember, Island Lake used to have the gathering.
Yeah.
Ian Tyson came to that.
Yeah.
Did you get your picture taken with him?
Not with him.
You got your picture taken with every famous person.
Yeah, but I wasn't the mayor then.
Oh, okay. So there's a lot of people trying these things, but finally the Wapiti, it was the right time, the right crew got it going, and so it's really been neat to watch that change from what was basically a mining town.
Mm-hmm.
And I came from Sunshine Village, and we had red uniforms there, and we had red ski pants. And I was skiing one day, and I had my red ski pants on, and I came downtown. This would have been in 1981, and you didn't walk around downtown Fernie with red ski pants on. Apparently, I just broke out, run over, had a guy yelling out the door of his truck at me. Can I get? So who do you think you are?
Red for a man would be kind of like,
yes,
not appropriate.
Exactly. I learned that
Not
pretty
because
quick.
they're minors.
I'm
Minors
just-
wouldn't be wearing red pants.
Well, and I think I don't want to profile anybody, but I suspect that he may have been. And he very colorfully explained what he thought of it. I mentioned that to Dave Rogers at the ski hill every day, at the next day, and he said, "Yeah, do you notice I changed back into my jeans before I go home from skiing?" And I started doing that, and yet today it wouldn't be.
Oh no, I mean everybody wears every color you can think
so
of.
today it wouldn't be as much of a deal, but I had to start learning to wear jeans when I moved to Fernie because of that. Where I grew up in Montreal, no one wore jeans, so.
For me, having been raised in Fernie, I really see the change in sophistication of the town and the people who are here. Now, I don't know if that's due to the changes in Fernie, or if it's due to the fact that technology has everybody has a cell phone with everything in it, that every bit of information you want is right there at your fingertips anytime you want. So maybe people are more knowledgeable on a whole lot of stuff, but certainly I think the town is more sophisticated now than it was years ago when I was growing up here.
In real estate, we're seeing people who are relocating here and able to work here because of technology.
Mm-hmm.
And they may be consulting still and be able to do the work and not be somewhere else. And so we're seeing a different sort of type of person and family units moving here. Kids are going to school, and they're still families, but they're not hopping on the bus every day to go to the mine. So although we still are, and despite what tech is saying, we're still selling people who are moving to town who are being hired by tech. But I think that's changing sort of the I don't want to say the demographics isn't the right word, but it's certainly changing the type of person that's living here, not for better or for worse or anything. It's just definitely a different mix of people who have different experiences and are working in different fashions and not totally tied to the mines. So.
Mm-hmm. So I remember when I was a councillor, I think it was maybe third year in council, and I brought up, and I'm sure you were there, I brought up that we should have flowers. Because I personally love flowers, and I know in Italy and in Europe there's flowers everywhere. And I just felt that if we were going to be a resort town, we should be beautiful. And I remember bringing it up and having one of the councillors say, "No, we don't need flowers, Fernie is beautiful enough." And I said, "Yes, of course Fernie is beautiful, the scenery is spectacular, but I'm talking about downtown. Let's have flowers downtown because it will beautify the streets, and it'll give it color." And I remember I was faced with lots of pushback, and then I said, "Fine, I'll give up." And Alan Chabot said to me after the meeting was over, he goes, "Mary, if you really feel strongly about it, you should fight for it." And I thought, really? So at another meeting, I brought it up again, and sure enough, I got support from the rest of you guys. And we put it out there, and who applies? Your wife Pam, who is terrific with growing all kinds of things, and she has been the one that's been doing it ever since, and I can't even recall how many years it's been.
Well, it seems like forever. I mean that in the nicest possible way. She had been doing some stuff for other businesses in town, and to be
around
honest,
town.
I don't know how she came about to start it. You'd have to ask her, and I don't. But I recall the old family truck turning into what we call the Kool-Aid truck, the old blue Chev that had the big tank in the back, and the city putting the baskets downtown, and it started with I think about 20 or 24 baskets if I recall, and now there's almost double
I asked
that.
for more.
And now that it includes the beds in front of City
Yeah.
Hall and the courthouse, it includes the what she does at the clock tower at Rotary Park.
Yeah.
It includes the flowers out by the chamber,
Yeah.
the entrance sign. You had those the ones put up by the cemetery, the entrance to
Yeah.
the cemetery,
Yeah.
and now by the, of course, the new washrooms downtown, they have them too. So it really has. And what was neat about it was, as a city initiative, was how the local businesses thought it was a good idea, and they didn't just, a lot of them didn't just look and say, oh good, they have flowers now. They said, oh, we can put flowers up too. And then the sum became greater than the individual parts in a lot of ways, and now with the pad decks we keep talking about, with them putting their flowers around it, it really has grown and taken on a and it's grown and grown. I mean, it used to be 3 or 4 hours a day, and now on a hot day in August, it's 8 or 9 hours, and quite a bit of water. And she's now just recently taken it to the next, in the last 2 or 3 years, taken it to the next level where if you look in the city yards, city hall, they have the vegetables.
And also the planters down Main Street.
Yeah, she's put
There's
some beans
beautiful
and
vegetables.
Swiss chard and kale.
Tomatoes.
It started with, but then it went to tomatoes and
Yeah.
cabbages, and then it led to every Tuesday her harvesting, so to speak,
Yeah.
and taking it to the Salvation Army, to the food bank.
Yeah.
And at the end of the year, when she starts taking up all the cabbages and all the rest of it, there was I think more than one, I think almost 2 full loads of a pickup truck that went with fresh produce to the, and then we have heard, I know you were putting it online and on Facebook and pumping her tires that way, and we've had other people, and they're saying other people who have too much in their own gardens that are starting to say, well, that's a great idea and a place to put it.
And Pam said that they told her that the food bank never got fresh items, and so the people that needed the assistance with food, they were so appreciative of those fresh vegetables. And I loved it because when Pam would do her harvest, she was sending me the photos, and then I could post them, and she had the most beautiful vegetables. And one lady, one senior from Trinity Lodge, said, oh my gosh, those cabbages are so beautiful, made me wish I had one. And so I said to Pam, look, this lady would like one. Pam went and took her one, and she was so appreciative.
Well, and that's the thing about Fernie, the one thing that hasn't changed, from 81 to 35 years later, or however long that is, a lot longer, anyways, is that we're still a very small community and still very connected. It seems that, everybody walking down the street, and there's a lot of that going on, despite what some people will say, and despite the world not being necessarily like that, there's still quite a bit of that element in Fernie, and it's nice to see that participation and that sense of community. And that may be the case of all small towns and to some degree, but I think Fernie, people have moved here for the lifestyle. They moved here for to be in that environment and not in a little colder or harsher or not as connected environment, shall we say. I'm not, again, judging one from the other, but that's one thing that still maintains in Fernie. And again, there's lots of people, not just Pam, but out there doing things to make that happen. To try to make sure that, you look at, it's never stopped from the day I arrived, the amount of volunteers that do things for, whether it's in, I was always involved with the minor sports with my kids, but in every endeavor, whether it's the Arts Council or whether it's the Historical Society, the library, there's just tons of people out there helping, and that seems to be, that hasn't changed, that hasn't declined in any way.
Excuse me.
When my kids were small, youth soccer was such a great thing. It still is. It's really grown. It's really quite organized now. We weren't that organized. as organized as we needed to be anyways. And John Travers and his wife
Yeah.
ran that for a long time.
For many, 25 years actually.
So I had the little guys, and you know, they're, I think I should call them Timbits now, I can't remember how old they are. I can tell you some funny stories about some kids then. And I told them on the first day, I said, you know, so I'm your coach, and we're going to meet here and every week and whatnot, and your job is to bring me chocolate chip cookies. And they always got these 4 or 5-year-old kids looking at me. And they all went home and said, you have to bring the coach chocolate chip cookies. And sure enough, the next week it started, and every week I got from a different parent, I got chocolate chip cookies.
No kidding.
And that carried on. I coached for about 14 years until my kids weren't playing anymore. And last summer I was out in front of the Extra Foods. It's Independent Foods now.
Yeah.
Sorry, I never get things right. It's still Beaver Lumber to me. Out on the highway, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It'll always be Beaver Lumber. Anyways, I'm in the parking lot, and 2 friends of my son were out there, and they rolled down the window because the only other talent I really have, besides babbling on like this, is I can talk like a duck. I have a duck voice, and these 2 kids yelled at me, and they're 24 or 5. Mr. McSkimming, can you still talk like a duck? And I went over to the thing and I talked like a duck, and they said, do you still eat chocolate chip cookies?
You still do.
So 20 years later, they still remember
remember
that,
it.
and that was, you know, that we had a lot of fun with those guys. I mean, I was the furthest thing from a real soccer coach. I didn't know much about it, but I knew how to, you know, lace up a
but you
kid's
were
soccer,
there.
lace up a kid's soccer boots, or lace up some skates or something like that, and I could talk like a duck, and I ate chocolate chip cookies, and so that's one that has been so nice about being here all these years, because there was a day when I was a newcomer, and I feel that I'm a little bit of a Fernieite now, even though I wasn't born here.
Because you've been here 40 years.
Almost 40 years.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, absolutely.
So there was, I don't know if I passed all the tests for being actually a local, but
For some people, you have to have like 10 generations of Fernie before you're considered a Fernie. I've only got 4, so I don't know if I still qualify yet.
my kids were born here, so I'll call that good.
So,
doesn't matter.
before we end though, you were 13 years on council. What did you enjoy about it? What do you think that you were involved with that you're really proud of, that you know, sort of like a legacy?
I learned a lot. I mean, it would never, it was the same thing twice, and there's so much to learn, the legislation and the stuff, and what we have to stick handle through to get anything done, I think was really hard, and it was a long learning curve. So I was on there for 6 years, then I was off for 3, and then I was on for 7 total. As far as any kind of accomplishment, there's 1 or 2 I can't mention. Wouldn't be appropriate to talk about, but I think that the one thing I did that I can take somewhat credit for was my very first, the budget system. The whole thing was really strange to me. We were sitting there one day in February and March talking about a budget, and I finally clued in. And I'm not the quickest learner in the room, going, we're talking about this year's budget, and we're 3 or 4 months into it. Why didn't we start talking about this 6 months ago? This is ridiculous, because we were trying to bring the cost of the pool in particular down to a usable thing, but the quarter of the year had already gone by.
Yeah.
And I remember that the gentleman who was in charge of that, I'm trying to remember what his name was, he talked really fast.
John Stewart?
Yeah. He was the fastest talker that I ever heard. Anyways, so we were going through this process, and we had absolutely 0 reserves. We had no reserves, and there was a feeling on council that we did not want to raise taxes at all. We weren't going to raise taxes a nickel. And I put up my hand and I said, we don't have any reserves, and I proposed that we put in a 3% tax increase and put the amount, that 3%, into a road reserve to start building roads for fixing the roads, because that's what you get nailed on at the grocery store. My road's got a pothole and everybody's upset about it, and they deservedly so. And so that was the first road reserve. Fernie in retrospect, I mean, Fernie had come out of a tough time and had gone through sort of the bankruptcy
Oh, yeah.
type of thing, so that may have been mismanagement, it wasn't lack of not wanting to have reserves, or just wasn't having the extra money to do it. So we got, that was the first reserve, and I don't know if you recall, I don't know why I remember this, although Randall used to remind me of this, and very fondly, kindly he would talk about that. It was $72,000. A 1% tax increase was $24,000. So 3% was 72,000, and that's certainly wasn't enough to fill a pothole, and it eventually got larger and became millions of dollars, and we were able to.
And then it went on that there was reserves for
Yeah.
absolutely everything.
Yeah, so I think that if I was to point out one thing that I feel that I initiated or spoke up about, it wasn't, everybody else had to agree with me and vote and do it, so it wasn't just me, but that was my earliest recollection. And Fernie, I think, has done well financially, been more responsible. And I remember talking to Jim Hendrickson, who became our CAO, but was our bean counter for a long time. And I remember saying, it just seems like we're always hanging on by our fingernails. Every council trying not to raise taxes too much, and you're just barely making it through. And he goes, "I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly how I feel every day at work, trying to keep things in." I really liked Jim and liked his attitude and how helpful he was to us. And but that's what I remember from council. There's just so much that you could do another 3 or 4 hours just on that.
That was really a good thing, because in 1931, Fernie went into receivership, and it wasn't until 1945 that they had an elected council again, and in between, the government appointed somebody to run the town. And then again in the 90s, they were close to bankruptcy. So I think that, the councils from then till now, till last year, because I can't speak for present or future councils, but what they all did was become fiscally responsible, try to put money away, try to not overspend. I think they did great.
And I don't think that, and what I learned in retrospect about the whole experience was it wasn't about what you're doing on any given day. It was laying the roadmap for the next council and the council beyond that, to making sure that things were in place and being handled appropriately and with, good forethought. I think more of it is that. I also, if I learned anything about council, and you've heard me say this before, is that you didn't necessarily agree with everybody around the room, and continually, remember that guy Patrick? Gee whiz, he's a piece of work. Anyways, Patrick's behind the camera, by the way. But what it taught me to do, and this is maybe comes with your years, and as my hair fell out, you learn that even though you don't always agree with somebody, and you don't, in some cases, don't even like them, and I'm sure they didn't like me, some of them, and I don't take it personally, but you learn to listen to them because they still loved Fernie, and they were passionate about what they felt, and they might be right, and you need to remember that keep your mind open and allow somebody to change your mind. And I think if I learned anything off of my 13 years there, it was to do that and to treat the job in that manner, as opposed to just having your own agendas and doing things. And I think that's that again comes with a little bit of experience, maybe comes with years, and maybe comes from maybe no one listening to me because my ideas weren't any good. I don't know what it was, but that's probably the most valuable thing I got out of it personally. And I had some great friends and relationships, yourself and Willard, who was here, and Dan Cox and Alan Young, and I still work together, and I'll go back through the years, and people I would not have met, and even the staff, so Cheryl Zaral and other people who aren't still there, and some who are there, who I really enjoy, and it's fun to see on the street from time to time, and those are lasting relationships, and it's just a good experience. It's a good thing to do, and it's not for everybody, but everybody has those parts of their life outside of their work, sort of, that they invest in, and it's good for them. It's good for you to keep growing.
But I think it's great because your initiative allowed for reserves to be built up, so that this year the present council was able to build an $7-8 million public works building
Yeah.
from the reserves, which means that taxes didn't have to go up, and the money was there. So that was a really good thing. And I agree with you that you need to keep your mind open all the time, because I changed my mind a few times. And you have to persevere. You just mentioned Patrick. I mean, Patrick was the one, if you recall, that was forever bringing up the Nordic Center.
Yeah.
I mean, he persevered and brought it up so often that Randall finally said, "Go ahead, do it," and he did.
I know, it's been a great
So,
thing.
you know, it's amazing, because I think when people actually go on council because they want to contribute to their community, they do in one way or another. They all do.
And the visionaries and things like that, sometimes, you know, the unfortunate thing is they're ahead of their time. Pam's brother, Danny McDonald, who developed Island Lake,
Exactly.
you know, and they struggled and they built this thing and they tried to figure it out. And I was up there helping put the logs up and scraping the bark off, and we would go out skiing and try to find places to go on snowmobiles and all the like and whatnot. And they struggled and struggled, and now look at it, you know, it's just, it just finally, they got to a point, and all of a sudden the idea and the whole traffic of what's happening in the Elk Valley and what's happening in tourism in general in BC or in Canada, all those things come together, and now it's just such a going concern. And the Nordic Center was something that just you needed to do, and it struggled, and you didn't get as much uptake as you hoped. Then all of a sudden one day some guy has a piece of land and said, let's do this here, and then it just explodes. But it has started with that vision, and there's been so many things like that around Fernie. The swimming pool was the same thing.
Yeah.
I remember the guys, Grant Laird was one of them,
And
coming to my
Cox.
door and talking about that sort of thing, and it takes a while, but you hang around long enough and you see it go from the struggling idea over time to all of a sudden it just blows open. And there's so many examples of that here. I mean, notwithstanding the ski hill, because Heiko's perseverance and the work he did up there, and working for him was also some of those experiences or things that I'll never forget. And getting to know him and what a man he was. And then it just blew wide open, you know, and so he was, you know, he was like Dan. He was a visionary again, who had ideas about how special this valley was. So
yeah, he really cared. I remember the year before he passed away, he said, "Mary, I wish I had more time, because there's so much more I want to do for Fernie." He really did.
I have to tell Heiko's story.
Okay.
I hope I have time. So
Heiko
used to always say that he wasn't a good skier. I'm not a good skier, because we'd always be telling him, you got to groom this. You've got buses coming from Alberta and kids, and you got to groom it. He goes, I went out and skied and I could ski fine, and I'm not a very good skier. One day we were on Cedar Ridge, and one of our group had fallen, and we were picking up the pieces and putting somebody back together, and I hear this rumble from above me. And Cedar Ridge is fairly steep, and the snow was quite deep, over our knees certainly. And I hear this bum, 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 bum. And out of the trees comes Heiko on a pair of the old skis. They were quite long and narrow in those days, on a pair of about 210s. And he's got a chainsaw in one hand, and it's running, and an axe in the other hand. And he's going to clear some bush down below. And he's skiing like at Mach 5, just flying through the powder, and off he disappears into the thing. But no, of course, he wasn't a very good skier. He would always tell us, but
if you're not a good skier, you can have that thing in one hand and the saw in the other.
And there was nothing more
chainsaw.
he liked was than cutting trees and trimming, you know, and clearing trails and stuff like that. And he was very hands-on that way, and I'll never forget that vision of him. And I told that story once at lunch I was having with him and a bunch of other guys, and his head just went down and started. He didn't deny it. But anyways,
he was certainly an amazing person.
Oh yeah,
really
we're all very
amazing.
fortunate to have known him, and we always called the way he ran the hill, because he was quite frugal. He liked to put every stamp on every envelope and whatnot, and he ran it, but it made money. You know, it proved the test and drove some people crazy, but he really knew everything was going on. He was so hands-on. But we called his method of running the ski hill hikeonomics.
Lovely.
And you know, in any person in a position like that, they get criticized and whatnot, but he kept that hill going through a lot of tough times and times when
Yeah,
it didn't
he did.
snow and whatnot. And I remember we'd get the call on Monday, we're opening the hill Friday. He decided, and there was only 6 or 7 of us in the ski school. I can't remember the lady's name. Her first name was Cam, and the other lady, she used to be at Trinity Lodge when we would have meetings there. I think she's gone now. They ran the day lodge and flipped hamburgers and had a couple of students helping them on the weekend. And there were 4 pro patrollers. Now they got like 25 or 30. And there was, I think, only a handful of ski lifties running the lifts, and they only had 2 cats, and only one of them would go up top. Only one of them was good enough, was strong enough to actually do the top of the mountain. The other one had to do the lower slopes and whatnot. And then you look at the operation they have today, where they have, I don't know how many cats they have, and ski patrollers, the ski school, and the day lodge is pretty much the same. They keep adding on to it, and the day lodge bar upstairs, you can still see where the original was. They've added the sunroom part onto it and stuff like that, but it certainly has gone a long way, and it all started with Heiko.
Yeah, he was an exceptional person, that's for sure.
And
he was very kind.
They were awfully, and Linda was awfully good to Pam. And when Pam first worked there, before we knew each other, they're still, when Pam speaks very fondly of Linda, and then when they see each other, there's always a hug and a conversation and stuff like this. And she's still cycling down from the ski hill from Grand.
Oh, I know, and she still travels.
Yeah.
She's very active.
So, anyways, the ski
But you touched on a word, volunteers, because Fernie runs on volunteers.
Yeah.
If you look at buildings, like we mentioned, the library, the senior center, the community center, the aquatic center, like I can't even remember all of the things that we have in Fernie, the art station, that were initiated by people from the community, volunteers that put in their time, their energies, their talents to make things happen.
Remember how proud George Magic was of the library?
Yes,
when it moved over to that big building, and what he had to do with that.
But even the original one, the one that is now the Mugshots, it was built in 1967. It was initiated by volunteers.
Yeah. And when people are passionate about it, it's amazing what they can do. And then when you sit around or spend as much time, and you more than I, because you were here as a young child, but you can really see the effect and the power of it, and it's great, and you just. It's funny because there's 2 types of people. There's people who get out and do things, and there's people who complain.
Yeah, we certainly have had our share of seeing both.
And so when I think about council, I think about a couple times when I got cornered in the produce section. I thought I was going to get tomatoes thrown at me over something, but my answer has now become just well, we could certainly use some help if you'd like to come along and step up and do something like that. And council maybe is more of an extreme, but on I'm still very involved with the Fernie Ghost Riders. My son played a long time ago, about 8 or 9 years ago was his last year on it, and we had followed him for years. I'd go to the games when they were kids, and it was great fun, and I still volunteer and work with them, and there's such a good, strong group of volunteers that have been around for a long time. And you go to the Kimberley game at Christmas, and see that place fill up to the rafters, 1,100 people in there, and the Aussies all chanting Kimberley as a girl's name. And,
really?
And they, it's all has been run, and there's such great history behind that team, coming out of the old Blazers and previous teams before that, but they've been good. George, and there was another person who was instrumental in it as well. So we're very fortunate, I think, in this
And all of the organizations, like you mentioned, the Ghost Riders, but like 3,300 and Lions and Elks, and just so many organizations, so many people, and actually a lot of the people are the same people working in all of the organizations.
Well, unfortunately, 5% of the people do 90% of the work, but I think we have other people coming to town. I have some new neighbors who got really involved and in various things.
Well, all the sports organizations that there are now, like the mountain biking, the trail builders, the Elk Valley Dolphins. There's just so much going on that is all volunteer oriented. Without volunteers, you wouldn't have it.
These neighbors are, in 2 instances, are people who are retired. Kids aren't invest, they're not
Yeah.
coaching their kids or anything like that, and they're out there working for the Trail Alliance, they're out there working for various things, and they came here and they said that's the way we're going to meet the community, that's the way we're going to sort of integrate into it and become part of the community by doing things like that. And I give them a lot of credit for not just showing up and sitting back and saying,
Yeah.
I've done my job, and so more and more you see that. So
And, I even think of the fact that our cemetery has been cleaned up by a group of people, like the Cossacks and Patrick Burke and a whole lot of other people that went and volunteered. And I remember Lynn talking about using a toothbrush to clean the writing on the stones on the old cemetery. So there's so many volunteers in this town that do so much, and that's what makes Fernie such a great little place.
I think so, and I think we just hope that they continue to, but I just hope that the powers that be and allow them to do that. That keeps the door open and allows them and helps them and makes it easier for them to do. We have a lot of great organizations here that I've seen grow from that didn't exist. So many of them that didn't exist back when I first came here. Back then, life was maybe simpler, but you played hockey or you skied. And then you went to youth soccer in the summer, and that was pretty much it, And then there was the group with Fred Geets and the judo.
Yeah, the judo.
That has grown.
He's still doing it.
Yeah, they still do well, and Saint and his taekwondo, and there's other little clubs that have grown and always been there, but all of a sudden gained when people started to come moving to Fernie, started to, and we have to remember that, we are a have town. We're not a have-not town.
Oh yeah.
The last census, we were up 18%.
Yeah, we were the highest of our size.
Yeah, of our type of community in all of Canada. So we have a lot to be grateful for, and the challenges that we faced are good ones, not what some other ones are. So, and that's been the story of, we've been through our ups and downs, and when Westar went down, and we've been through the ups and downs of it all. We're not certainly immune to it, but it seems to be, we have always seem to be a little insulated because the town's been fairly diverse, and it's become more diverse. So,
yeah, it's certainly a great place to live.
Yeah,
because it's got some great people.
Well, that's what makes it. That and the mountains.
Yeah, I agree. I have got friends who believe that because we are so close to mountains, that it's a real healing place, and that's like another topic in itself. But there are people who believe that mountains are healing, and that's why people love being around them, because you feel good. It makes you feel good emotionally, psychologically. And certainly when I look out and see mountains, like I'm looking out the window now and I see the mountain, Fernie Mountain, it's just makes me feel comfortable, it makes me feel good.
Yeah, unless you're tumbling down them like I spent a lot of my life.
It's easy enough to enjoy it when you're sitting in the comfortable chair looking out the window, but no, in all honesty, it's wonderful to be able to go outside, and wherever you look, Fernie is the only city in the Rocky Mountains that is completely encircled by mountains.
Yeah.
Did you know that? Of course you do.
I never knew we were the only one.
Yeah, we are the only one that is completely encircled.
I never checked.
Yeah, well, I found out that's true, absolutely true.
Nice.
In the Rocky Mountains. So that is an amazing thing for you. You can stand anywhere in Fernie and turn around, twirl, and you see mountains. And it's wonderful.
It is indeed.
Dan, it's been great talking with you. Thank you so much for agreeing to come.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's been quite a journey.
Well,
these sorts of
we haven't seen each other for a long, long time, and
well, I'm only around the corner.
we used to spend a lot of time together at one time.
Yeah.
13 years worth.
Yeah. That's one of those relationships.
13 for you and 16 for me. So
will never go away. So
it's always good to keep
fun.
connections.
Thank you, and thank you for doing this, and Patrick for taking the time and putting this whole thing together. It's going to be valuable down the road one day.
Volunteers again, we want to
100%.
Document and show people in the future what Fernie was like from the eyes of people who were living here, because you can read something, but it's not the same as actually listening to somebody speaking and talking about those days. So,
100%.
thank you so much.
Thank you, dear. Thank you, Patrick.